No
Delighted to
worries.
welcome onto the First Time Facilitator podcast, Mark Garrett Hayes. Mark, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure, Leanne. Thank you so much. And greetings from sunny Ireland. It's April and the sun shining, which is fantastic. It's a great sign of spring.
Oh,
So although it's dark in the background, it's actually morning time here.
interesting because it's a complete role reversal. Last time we chatted, it was sunny in Australia, but today it's been raining for 3 days. And I don't respond very well to that. So it's nice to hear that it's sunny in some part of the world.
That's right. I'm used to it.
Yeah, that's right. And look, we did chat last time on your podcast called Training Business, and I was thrilled to share some of my solopreneur lessons and also excited to get you back and continue that conversation. For those listeners that have no idea who you are, Mark, can you please share a bit of your career story, some pivots that bring you to the work that you do today?
Sure. So I began actually working for Disney, would you believe, years ago. I was one of the team members recruited or cast members to welcome new prospective employees to the company. And that was in the States. And then I went to Paris, to Marne-la-Vallée, to what was then Euro Disney. And I was roped in to train. And originally I'd gone to hotel school. And the reason was, Leanne, I'd wanted to learn languages and to travel and to see the world. And interestingly, that's become one of the ancillary benefits of training, is that I've got to see amazing countries. We'll come back to that though. So I began to train and people said, you know what, you're pretty good at this, or at least you look like you're enjoying it. And I said, you know what, I am. I'm really surprised. I thought I'd be embarrassed and just really self-conscious. But it's funny how sometimes people come to training from different disciplines. And I found that it really gelled with me. I love the structure of creating lesson plans. I loved putting thought into how to explain things creatively, and often just realizing I've made an impact. And I could see people thinking, you know, that was great. I really came away thinking I couldn't do this. Now I can. And the more I did this, the more I realized that it was actually a two-way street. On the one hand, people were getting something from me, but on the other hand, I was getting massive I'd say confirmation from the audience. This is what I'm here to do. So I carried that lesson forward. And then whichever industry I went into finance for a while, would you believe, in banking in Germany, where I lived for a number of years. And again, same thing. People said, anyone like to volunteer for training? And I said, yeah, I'll give it a go. So I did. And each time I kind of kept coming back to training. And I finally realized this is the thing for me. It's what I should be doing. It's what I love to do. It's what people tell me I'm good at doing. So I went then to work for a fintech company. So from finance to fintech, and same thing again, gravitated towards training. So every time I've kind of come away from training, I've kind of ended back up in training. And my mother was a teacher. Both my grandparents, my grandfathers on both sides were teachers, and for some reason, perhaps it's in the blood, I just love what I do. And then I decided to start a podcast, trainingbusiness.com, and to interview people who love training like you do. And I'm having a ball. Yeah, that's it.
That's so cool.
So far.
Yeah, I mean, just your career history, the different industries that you've worked in. Surely you would have thought when you were younger and you worked for Disney in that role, like, how can life be better than this? Was it that good a role in person as it seems to be on paper, working in that cast role for Disney?
It was. You know why? Because the more and more I worked with people, particularly in the States, they were careerists. They were people who'd grown up with the mouse. They'd always loved Disney, and it was in the blood. So it's a cultural thing. And people, when they came to work on their first day, had smiles up to here. They were just so thrilled to be working for the mouse. We're talking about the characters, and that's one of the things that we had to do as people training prospective cast members. We had to learn how to exude this Disney kind of almost instinct. So we'd almost have to rehearse all the names. We'd have character breakfasts. We'd have Pluto coming in to say hi, well, without speaking. And it was really a way of life. It was just a massive privilege to be around people who loved just working for this company, and they wore their badges of 15, 20 years of work history proudly. And I can say it's probably the most impressive company I've worked for. Just
Yeah.
this, I mean, one of my favorite films is Beauty and the Beast.
Oh,
Admit
that's
that
awesome.
freely.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool.
I love all the characters. So yeah, yeah.
Oh gosh, so many Disney films. The Little Mermaid is mine, but The Lion King, oh my gosh, just amazing,
Oh
right? So
yeah,
that's what I was thinking. Like, how do you beat that? So thank you for confirming that that it is a dream to work for. It would have been disappointing to hear that. Oh, that was
it
the
is.
worst job. So that's really cool. What's also great about your story
Yeah.
is that as you were talking, you said I went to all these different companies and they said, oh, we need someone in training, and you put your hand up and you kept saying, yeah, I'll do it. Can you just talk us through? That and the opportunities that you found yourself getting because you were willing to put your hand up. Did you feel like you were ready? Were you always prepared when you put your hand up, or was it a bit of a stretch for you?
Yeah, great question, Leanne. And I think that for many people listening, it's often this voice in the head which says, I have to be prepared. I have to be the subject matter expert. I've got to know more than the audience. That's not true. It's not true. You have to be willing to stand up. And I think if you want to stand out, you have to stand up. And many people have said to me, when they master public speaking, when they finally get on their feet and communicate, they're noticeable and they're noticed. People then remember that person and the way they made them feel. And it's the art of communication. So you don't have to know everything about the subject. You don't have to know more than the audience, but you've to just be able to communicate something with passion. And that, I think, is key. If you're willing to take the risk, and everyone screws up, everyone stuffs up, as you say in Australia, everyone,
Yeah.
has a learning curve, and sometimes the curve's like this. But when you take a leap of faith and you jump in front of people and you say, you know what, let's walk through this together, and you become a kind of a point of reference. Not just, you're not necessarily the point of attention, but you can create and facilitate an experience where people come away thinking, that was amazing. Would you do this again? And this happened to me. So I don't come across as the most extrovert of people because I'm not. I'm an introvert. And many consultants, many trainers are actually natural introverts, but they shine when they're put in a position where they feel, hey, I can help someone. And perhaps there are people out there just like me who are introverts and they're afraid to put their hands up. I can make them feel comfortable because I recognize what it's like to be, one of those introverts creeping along in the background, those lurkers.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I am an extrovert, but I still get those feelings of nerves when I feel like maybe this is a bit of a stretch. And so it's really comforting to hear that. I love that phrase, stand out. To stand out, you have to stand up. I think we've got our episode title right there. So that's so early in the conversation, Mark. The other thing that you said in that story, people said, wow, that's amazing. Can you do that for my team? And you have a podcast about training business and building that. It doesn't have to be for solopreneurs, but building a training business. How often do you think that we rely on that we rely on the great experience we drive in our workshop to then create more bookings for us as facilitators? I know that you work in sales as well, so I'm interested to hear your approach on the mix of creating word of mouth versus outreach as well.
Yeah, and it's a good point because I listen to podcasts too, and as you do, and I've come across other people who kind of have retired from what they do and now have a podcast or a show or some kind of site. And you and I are both practitioners. So I still train people, and my area is sales training. And I found that when you don't just stand up, but think, how can I stay on? And you realize, you know what, I've got to have some kind of method. It is never enough just to train people. If you want to make it a business, you have to think, how can I generate leads? How can I generate income? How can I get people coming back to knock on my door? So many people have said to me, how do I start a training business? And I say, well, you could try these things. And then they say, well, how do I make it a business? And I say, that's the right question to ask, because we have to think of ways to generate consistent recurring revenue. And quite a lot of the time, people are thinking of leaping from paid employment into working for themselves. And they kind of put half a toe in the water. So when it comes to generating leads, you've got to have some kind of system. And what I think of is what I call the natural network. All of us have friends, we've got family, we've got people who like us, trust us, know us. We should be using that as an initial bridge to get some kind of referrals. Now, I think of 3 R's. You've got references, you've got referrals, and recommendations. Let me break those down for you.
Awesome.
So references are things that people say, which are nice. They say nice things about you. Leanne's fantastic, or Mark is great at these things. But often it's just like throwing a compliment out there. You can't link it to any kind of business generation. So the kinds of things that someone might say about you on your webpage or on your Twitter feed or even on LinkedIn, we'll call those references. They're just kind of statements in a nice way, but they're not really linked to anything, any clear benefit for anyone. A referral then is when someone actually says to you or says to someone else, you know what, give Frank a call, give Leanne a call. I think she does this. And if you knock on her door, she might be able to talk a couple of options through. So it's well-intentioned. It perhaps refers to someone, but there's no real bridge there. It's just like pointing to someone across the bank of a river and saying, you know what, that might be nice for you. So again, many times people come to me thinking, I need references. And I say, actually, you don't. What you really need are recommendations. So what's the difference? Well, a referral, as I said, is something where someone gives you, let's say, a name, or they say, my sister works in X. Why don't you give her a call? But there's no real clear benefit to them or you. The recommendation is when someone proactively or actively says, I'm going to champion you here. Excuse me. I'm going to give you an introduction, or I'll arrange a lunch for you or some kind of coffee. Why don't we have a call together? Why don't we go through these things together? So the recommendation is work on both parties. On the one hand, you've got to shape this actively. So what I recommend to people is have a look through the LinkedIn profile of the people you know and trust. Say, Frank, do you mind if I look through your profile and find a couple of people that I would like you to make an active recommendation to on my behalf? Yeah, why not? And then when you've done that, say, actually, I found 3 people, magic number 3. I think these people would be great for me. Here's why. You have to really explain to the person why this person's right for you, because you're effectively coaching them into becoming a recommendation machine for you. Now, you only need this 2 or 3 times from a couple of people. You've got the basics for a business. You've got the basis for people who now know you, trust you, but can promote you and recommend you actively. So in summary, a reference is someone who might just give you something kind, like some kind of word or an email. It's a testimonial. A reference, a referral is when someone makes an introduction but doesn't really pull away. They just say, talk to Frank, Jim, Leanne, Bob, Mark. And a recommendation is when you involve yourself in shaping what this person needs to be able to recommend you. You give them a clear idea of the avatar or person to recommend you, and you also get them involved in helping to recommend you. So here's what I need you to do. Here's the way I need you to introduce me. And Robert Cialdini, who's the author of the book, The Psychology of Influence, I think you know this one too, talks about the principle of liking. So when people like you or people work with you, they're people who tend to like you and are like you. So if you can help people to realize why you are likable, how to recommend you, it's going to work much better than just saying, could you make an introduction for me? And Cialdini wrote a book called Persuasion in 2017. And the book is all about how to get people to basically say nice things about you in a structured way. So for example, when someone is introduced to the Oscars or is about to be brought on stage, there's a voice in the air that says, and now please welcome on stage 2 times Academy Award winner X. So that person's been told exactly what to say. So a recommendation has these hallmarks. It's someone who knows you, trusts you, likes you. But they're also willing to listen to you, be coached by you, so they can actually act as a bridge for you and help you to be introduced to the right person. So when I think of the people who recommended me, or I could describe accurately as recommenders, there's about 6 or 7 of them. The rest are just references and referrals. Yeah, that's all.
Oh gosh, I love this. Thank you for getting into the detail and giving us numbers. Like you need 3 people. And it sounds like the references, they're quite passive. The recommendations, it's more of an active role. But you're also sort of busting a myth here.
Exactly.
I know when I started my solopreneur business, you think, oh my gosh, I need to have all of these clients on my books and then I'll be successful. In fact, that's probably not what you want, because I did have that for a while and it was chaos, like having to manage all the different sort of teams and manage that relationship. Yeah. And I'm in a comfy place now where it's like, if I have like 2 or 3 really good clients that give me ongoing work, that is amazing, because yeah. And so the power in tiny numbers is actually good. And the fact that you've said you've got 6 people in your corner and that's all you need, I think is extremely reassuring to people that want to start their business. How long did it take you to, like, I know you said you're a sales trainer. So you've obviously incorporated this stuff into the work that you do with training businesses, but you've got these amazing frameworks here. I love that you've got this IP, like it's really easy to remember, Mark. So how did you capture your IP when it comes to this type of work?
I guess it's just through standing.
Oh, I'm losing you now, so I'm going to stop my video.
I won't bore you with the details, but what I find quite useful when it comes to lead generation is what I call lead qualification. And what that is that you have to be very clear on how you're going to qualify someone. So if you go lifting the phones and start calling people willy-nilly without thinking, what does a lead look like? What does a person who meets my requirements, my criteria look like? What do they do? What decisions do they make, etc.? So when I'm thinking of all the frameworks I use, I can say perhaps only 2 or 3 of them are mine. The rest have just been borrowed and modified. And I think that's true of many trainers. We don't necessarily have all our IP under our name, or at least the stuff we use day to day tends to be, it's been improved, invented by the people. I'm thinking of Wendy Kirkpatrick's or Donald Kirkpatrick's 4-level model of training evaluation.
Yeah.
That's something invented by him. And I think then Wendy, his daughter-in-law, and then Donald's son, they improved that slightly. So I think that's quite common to take someone else's IP and to modify it. And of course, as trainers, if we're doing that, we need to be very clear about whose IP this is. The last thing you want to do is to claim something's your own. But when it comes to lead generation, there's something that is quite useful. It's called BANT. And what it stands for is budget, authority, need, and timing. So if you're phoning people and looking for leads, you've got to have some kind of framework which says, I'm happy that I know if I have this conversation, I've asked the right questions, and now I can say, this is a lead or it's not a lead. And there's nothing more frustrating when running your own business and you're chasing the things that don't actually end up producing results. So early on, when you're breaking new ground and talking to people, and you've got some call or a video call like we're doing now, you've got to be clear on the kinds of questions to ask. So budgetary questions would be those which clarify, is this someone with the purse strings? If they were to spend money on a training initiative, a workshop, where would that money come from? Who's the signatory? In what time frame will those funds be released? You could talk numbers. Sometimes it's premature at this stage, but you get a feel for, where the money comes from. Sometimes it's something that comes from what we call operating expenditure, OPEX, or is it something that comes from several budgets? Could be HR, it could be L&D, depending on the organization size. The authority, or the A part, that's to do with the person you're speaking to. Ideally, that person is someone who actually makes a purchasing decision. And it's so easy, Leanne, to get, to fall in love with having conversations with people who've got no power to actually say yes to you. And that's a classic mistake I've made in the past. HR, where someone says, oh, that sounds wonderful. When can you start? Only to realize that the person who actually makes that decision, we call this inking it or signing it, is 2 layers above that person. So it's really important that we're clear on who has authority to make a purchasing decision, who's got the power to hire you, to say yes to you. The N is need. And that means that when you're having a business conversation, not a training conversation, a business conversation, is this person clear on what the problem is they're trying to solve? Because training isn't just about conveying information, it's achieving transformation. So how can I get really clear on what this business needs and what results they have to have? What's nice to have, what's necessary to have? How can we put a price or a value on the successful transition from where they are here to where they want to be then? And that gap we close, that's the need. That's the real needs analysis. Now, as trainers, we should be conducting training needs analysis, but not just training needs analysis, business needs analysis. What does this business need from you? How can you actually help them to say yes to you? And that's by putting together a damn good case study that says, here's how I've helped a company like yours in the past achieve these things, or I haven't achieved these things for your exact industry, but here's how it would work. And here's the value this would represent to you. And there's a phrase in sales training, which is no need, no lead. Without an exact clarification of what someone needs from you, why they need you, as opposed to them or them or them, it's very hard to stand out as a trainer, as a facilitator. And the final thing is timing. And that means time frame. And the number of times I've had conversations with people who've said to me, yeah, we'll be doing this sometime this year. What does that mean, sometime this year? Look at the year we've had in the last 12 months. It's been chaotic. So we need to tie down, when is someone willing to push the button? It could be something where you might say, tell you what, why don't we do a taster session here? That gets the ball rolling. So anything which puts control in your court is very important to you. Otherwise, things are kicked down the line. And what happens is someone else has a conversation and they introduce themselves and you're replaced. So timing is very, very important. Unless someone has a realistic time frame, T, unless you're talking to someone who's got the authority to say yes to you, A, unless someone like you, ideally you or your team, have a real clear understanding of need, what that converts into in terms of business requirements. And unless you can say, I know where the money's coming from, you really have to say, have I really got a lead? There's nothing worse starting off in your business by being frustrated by chasing things that don't actually work. So I'm glad you asked that question, Leanne. We're all salespeople, not just trainers. We have to be salespeople and marketers, decision makers, designers, everything when we're running our own business. And sales is crucial. Without cash flow, you're dead in the water every single time.
100%. Yeah, I love that that BANT, B-A-N-T. So my question for you is, I could go down many different paths here, and I'm tempted to, but I'll focus on the most obvious one here. So you've got this framework in mind of the ideal buyer. You're asking for recommendations and people to define them for you, who may have the authority, that may own the budget. Assessing that need though, because you're reaching out to someone that you're not too sure whether they would have a need for what you do. So is it then a case of, okay, I won't pursue them, or let's open up a dialogue? And what do you do there?
That's a great question. You have in sales this concept of what's called ICP, which stands for Ideal Customer Profile, or in plain English, avatar. And what this means is you've got to be really clear on what the ideal person is for you. So you can do exercises with Post-it notes. You can, use Miro or Mural, and you can put together this kind of big, colorful list of what this person looks like. So the clearer you are on the industry, the vertical, that niche, where they work, what they do, what their challenges are, the clearer you are on what's value to them, why someone would need someone like you, the more successful you'll be in narrowing that down. I'm not sure if I answered your question properly, actually.
No, I think you really
need coffee.
Yeah. I'm at the end of my day, so I could have a glass of wine. But no, I think you're right. You actually have answered it, because what you're saying is, if you're so deep within an industry or within understanding what a role does, or their pillow problems, things that keep them up at night,
I love that.
You'll be able then to have that conversation and identify what their needs are very quickly, because you're so in tune with that market.
Yes, exactly. It's a question of just saying, do I sound like I understand that person at the end of the phone? It's so easy to come into a call, or when you're prospecting, as we call it, to talk about you. and it comes across as the same thing everyone else does, which is, let me tell you about me and what I've done and how I've pulled myself up by the bootstraps and how I've achieved this. And I think of all the calls that I get, or I listen to sales calls as part of my business, and I hear people saying, the first 2 minutes are about them. I just wanted to X. That's all about you. Whereas if you can open a conversation with something you found out about them, something you've listened to on one of their, let's say, videos, or some market report that you've learned about and recently, and it has this impact on them in this way, that is what most people don't do. Most people, when selling themselves, talk about themselves.
Yes.
Okay, so to sell me, I have to talk about me. No, to sell you, you have to talk about them, all the way around. So think about, how can I begin in a fresh way where I give them some insight, or I share something, we call this a hook, where literally someone goes, whoa, I didn't know that, or that's about to happen. So you move from salesperson to trusted advisor. So they see that you have their interests at heart. And this is the difference between having a, let's say, a generic outreach conversation where we call any number of people, hoping that someone just sees how we can be of value to them, or we think of how we can be of value to them, and then we go find people to talk to.
Oh, I love
so
that.
we flip the things on its head. Yeah.
I think that's very, because I was going to ask you, I was going to ask you a question about confidence and self-belief, self-worth, but I think you're answering that because you're saying, well, it's not about you and your value that you can bring. And I think this is probably the skill of facilitators. So it's actually, we've got this meta skill in facilitation that we can use in sales, is that with facilitation, it's always about our group. It's not about us. It's about creating the great dynamics within the group. So what you're saying is you can use that same skill and move it to sales, and it's about the person that you're serving, and adding value that way, rather than you being like that sage on the stage.
Yeah, I like that, sage on the stage. It's a different skill set. And many trainers say to me, I love training, I hate selling. I love training, it's great, but I hate selling myself because I sound self-conscious, or I don't really come across as confidently as I'd expect to be. So if you think of the mindset shift, just think of serving people. You're not selling them, you're serving them. You're serving them up insight. You're serving them up fresh perspective. That's what you're selling. You can't really sell training until you've sold the vision of what they could have and can't have without you. So when I think of the people who've made impact to me as salespeople, people who've sold me things, they're people who begin by talking about me, not about themselves. Now we have this triptych, if you will, or three things in communication called ethos, pathos, logos. And what that means is that when we communicate for the first time, we're answering a question in people's heads: who the hell are you? So ethos, think of the word ethics in English, clarifies what gives you authority to speak on a specific subject. The logos is the why am I talking to you? This is the structure of what this conversation is for, where we'll go. It's like you and I having this chat now. We have a structure to this call-ish, kind of. Yeah. Hopefully I'm following it. Yeah. And the pathos, though, that's the interesting thing. It's why you should care about what I have to say to you. So ethos, logos, pathos. So when you're contacting someone for the first time, think of the emotional connection you can make with that person. What's it like to be in their shoes with their challenges? Which is why I always strive, excuse me, not to connect with HR people initially. I might come back to them in terms of signing off that training agreement or that series of coaching sessions I do. But I'll always try and track down the person who has that problem, owns that problem, recognizes that problem, because they will know and recognize someone who can solve that problem. So when you think of what it's like to be in their shoes and say, how can I come across, not like a trainer, but someone who knows what it's like to run a team? And this is where, of course, indexing your skills is crucial. There's no point pitching for a training business you can't actually deliver on. So if you think of the skill sets you have and say, if I were to speak to someone on that side of the fence, that organization, who would I naturally gel with? HR, sales, marketing? Is it maybe procurement? So if you think of that person, having that face-to-face conversation where that person recognizes in you a kindred spirit, because you know what language they use, you know what struggles they have, you know what their goals are, what their work is like, that person's more than likely going to be someone who has a natural fit with you. And that person can often be the bridge and say to you, actually, like a signpost, go this way for Jim, go that way to Sanjay, and this way for Pradeep. So all of a sudden, that person becomes like a champion. They gel with you. They see that you're like them, and they're more likely then to help someone just like them. Again, that's the principle of liking at work. So there are many, many ways that you can, use your existing skill set, your existing strengths, your existing likes to find someone like you and to help you to be almost referred or recommended in the organization.
Oh, love this. This has been awesome, Mark. I'm so grateful for your tips. I've just got a couple, like 2 more questions if you've got the time. So I'm a millennial, and when my phone rings, I tend not to answer it because especially if I don't know the number.
Really?
So
okay.
I've checked with my fellow millennials and they agree. But I also know that I've worked with people in organizations, like different generations, and they're like, you must like call first. And they're always about, you must call rather than default to email. And defaulting to email seems like the easy way out. What are your tips for someone like me who, like, I don't know. I don't like getting phone calls. So what's your strategy for, like, is it teeing up a time beforehand?
Yeah, it is. And I think people, specifically in the context of COVID now, have become very conscious of family time. And there's this, we all know this, there's now a blur between home and work. And for many people, what they've learned is to ring fence time. And often calls come across as interruptions. Now, there's nothing wrong with cold calling. I train people to cold call, but it's not the most effective way. And there was a time maybe 15, 20 years ago when you could have found people's phone numbers and call them and they'd be open to having a conversation with you. But more often than not, people are now very conscious, or at least they should be, in terms of how they spend their time. So what I find quite useful is to do things that other people don't do. What do I mean? Well, if you really, really want to get in the door of a company, think of something like direct mail. Now, direct mail, back in the 80s, 90s, that was quite prevalent. And then along came this thing called the internet in the mid 90s. So most people right now are electronically connecting with people. And I think if you can find some way to put something physical in someone's hand, it's amazing how often that will find their way to them, because most people don't expect to receive anything physical. So if you've got something you can print off, oh my goodness, something of paper I can look at. I've had people say to me, you know what, you're the first person to do that in a long, long time. Wow. So is there a way to get something in someone's hand? And then next thing is obviously is video. You've got tools like Bonjoro, loom.com. I drop a Loom video link into Sales Navigator when I'm connecting with a person for the first time. And I can use an image, and I'm holding up a sign. Now, I don't do this very often, but the sign might have their name or something on it like that. It's a bit cheesy, but often just a Loom video with a link. People are curious and they click on this. And in this video, which takes maybe 3 minutes, I explain, those 3 things: who the hell I am, why I'm talking to them, why they should care, and some next steps are called to action. And that's really impactful. People often will ignore this, but you don't need to worry about that. You just need enough people to click on the link, and enough people, it's a numbers game, by the way.
Yes.
To actually say, that was really interesting. And yeah, let's talk. So it's often about creating that perception of being inventive, of creative, of being thoughtful. This. I've looked at your Twitter feed. I found this thing today, and that got me thinking, actually, Jim. And you know what? On the basis of what I've done recently, I think it would make sense to talk for these 3 reasons. Bang, bang, bang. Just 3, not 4, not 5, not 6, 3. 3 is a nice number. It's brain friendly. A, B, C, 1, 2, 3. So people love things in 3s. So if you do that, just those 2 things, like direct mail, something physical, and then something like a video, personalized, using loom.com, first 5 minutes are free of every call, every video. You'd be amazed how impactful that can be for some people.
Oh my
Just
gosh.
do things that other people aren't doing.
Yeah.
Okay?
That's so funny that you talk about that philosophy, Mark, because like you said, I mean, that's what I talk about in my podcast, is creating unpredictable workshop experiences that predictably work.
Yeah.
You're saying the same thing, like just do it with your outreach, just be unpredictable. And I love how traditional modes of connecting like direct mail are so unique right now. I mean, imagine even handwriting something that people would be like, oh my gosh, yet they have time to do that.
Wow. Now, if you go too far, it looks like Murder, She Wrote, or some, 80s rerun where it's like, dear XYZ. We're not saying, go full school, old school. What we're saying is just do something different, where you print something off, you personalize something in some way. In this mass age of outreach, where it's so easy to just ping someone, call someone, if you take the time to be thoughtful, to be resourceful. It's amazing the impact that creates, because people think, you know what, the outreach wasn't so impactful, but what actually got me was the fact that you took the trouble to do this. That's what sold me. It's like you said, you had me at hello. You had me at direct mail.
You had me at direct. Well, yeah, like, and the whole thing on, you see TikTok videos of people unboxing things. So it's quite ceremonial when you get something physical. So I'm really excited now to, can't believe I'm going to say this, to do some outreach. I'm pumped. I think you've made this, when you talk about being creative in your approach, that really resonates with me. And I'm positive it's going to resonate with a ton of our listeners who have decided to be facilitators because they want to be creative and have variety. So thanks for taking the sting away from sales. I think that's what you've really done on this call in a really
have fun with it,
Leanne.
Way. You know, I think just final thoughts here. Don't call it sales. If that sets off a trigger in your mind where you think, oh my God, I've got to be a cheesy salesperson, I've got to lead with myself first, lead with them. Do what you do as a facilitator. Put them first. Think of your user. Think of the conversation as a user experience over the phone, over video. How can you do this in a way that you come away feeling good about yourself? You've put some thought. I mean, you wouldn't train anyone, nor would I, Leanne, without putting thought into the experience that they want from you. You'd research their organization. You'd find out about the people in the room, perhaps conduct some kind of survey before you train them, all of these things. And you'd conduct some kind of, some kind of session with yourself to plan an impactful workshop or training. Do the same thing when it comes to sales. Just think of having a great conversation where you're comfortable that you're going to be helpful and resourceful and useful, and then flip that on its head. It isn't a sales conversation anymore. It's a service conversation. Be servant leaders. You've got to serve before you deserve.
Oh, awesome. You've got some awesome one-liners here. I can't wait to.
That's my IP, by the way.
That's your IP. Awesome. All right. We'll make sure we get that quoted to you, Mark. Thank you so much for sharing all of this. I think it's been absolutely packed with value. You've just shown us what it's like to serve. So thank you. If our listeners would love to reach out to you, listen to your show, connect with you more, where can we send them, Mark?
Yeah, thanks, Leanne. Well, apart from the obvious, I guess, LinkedIn, Mark Garrett Hayes. You can find me simply on, well, you can't find, because the website isn't live yet. That's my fault. Trainingbusiness.com. And the podcast's been running for 2 years. The website was up, then down again, up again, down again, but it's going up again in May. But mark@trainingbusiness.com, or simply check out the podcast. And Leanne's a fantastic podcast too. So if you're listening to my show, you should be listening to Leanne's, and maybe vice versa. So yeah, thank you for my opportunity to speak to your audience. And just final thoughts, just if you're thinking of making the jump into training, take your cue from Leanne, take your cue from people just like you. It's a wonderful, wonderful job, wonderful profession.
Yes.
It's a privilege to do what we do, Leanne. I'm sure you agree.
Oh, 100%. We didn't even talk about the world travel. Not that it's too relevant now, but yeah,
it will be again sometime.
Yeah, best job in the world. Thank you so much. Definitely check out Mark's podcast. He's had some amazing guests on, including Alan Weiss, I think Michael Bungay-Stanier as well. Just some superstars in this field. Thanks again.
Pleasure, Leanne. Take care.
All right.